I have a very nice looking OS FS-30 surpass engine here. Now, I just recently picked this up off of RC Groups as part of a 4-stroke or a 30 size 4-stroke engine comparison I'm going to do. This is the 4th engine that I was waiting for the comparison. Managed to find this on RC Groups. Bought it from a fellow that basically converts 4-stroke engines into gas ignition engines, and this was one of his first attempts. So unfortunately there are some condition issues with this engine right off the bat. And you'll see that the drive washer has numerous holes and a magnet in it for the pickup. Unfortunately, the crankcase also has numerous holes half drilled in it too, so I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes here. So it doesn't look like any of them penetrate through to the bearing, and I've been searching for a replacement crankcase unsuccessfully. So what I think I'm probably going to end up doing with these holes is just filling them with JB Weld. And luckily for me, I just so happen to have a different drive washer here from another OS-40 surpass engine that'll fit. So I can replace that. It's in a little bit better condition than this one, but he said that this engine might even still require some break-in. And looking inside the exhaust port here, I can see there's a little bit of carbon on the valve stem. But I mean, the thing seems like it has really good compression, and it looks pretty new. So I'm just going to take it down here real quick and take a look inside and see if I can kind of gauge a little bit better what the condition of the engine is. Make sure I don't need to replace any bearings or anything. So let me take this screw out here for the carb. He told me this engine's never been disassembled before either, so fully expecting to feel and hear the snapping of fasteners as I break the torque free. Hoping that we see a gasket on here, but this is a hit or miss thing with small OS engines. Some have them, some don't. This one has a gasket. This carb seems to move really well. It doesn't have any kind of, doesn't look like there's any kind of residue or anything in there. It moves freely. A gasket comes off nicely, so I'll save that and reuse that. Let's go to our rocker cover next. I think as far as I'm going to go with this is just take the back plate off, and I'm going to remove the head, and that's all I'm going to do, I think. I'm going to get my magnifiers on here. Now this looks like there's definitely some runtime on there. It's not pristine looking in there, so there's definitely some runtime on this engine. Let's pop this back plate off real quick here and see what that looks like. Looks pretty nice in there. Pretty clean. Kind of dry. I don't really feel any residue on the counterweight. Definitely has been run. Smells a bit odd in there. Let's see, is there a clear gasket? No, there's no gasket on this back plate at all. That's kind of interesting. Alright, so take these rocker arms off here. I'm not really going to disturb those much. I'm just going to set them aside there. Grab the push rods out. Now, OS push rods are symmetrical. They don't have tapered ends at all. And so they're exactly the same, so they can be mixed up. If they get mixed up, it's no big deal. Okay, so there's only 4 head bolts on here, so I didn't even really have to do that. Wow, that was a little nerve-wracking. Make sure I get full engagement there. Okay, I heard a crack there when that one broke free. Full engagement. Make sure we don't strip any heads here. Now that particular screw didn't feel nearly as tight as the others. So I had 2 really tight screws and then 2 that didn't feel so tight, which is odd. That could be an issue in assembly there. Okay, let's just pop this over here real quick. Put this one over here, push rod tube. Okay, so if you look inside here, this does look nice and clean. I don't know how much runtime it's got, but that's what I'm here to try and estimate anyway. And I would say, just looking at that, it doesn't have much at all. A couple tanks, if even that. Here's the reveal of the valves. I don't know if you can get a much cleaner looking set of valves than that. Now the fellow told me he didn't run any gasoline through this thing, but that it was only glow fuel he ran through there, but this just doesn't smell like glow fuel to me. I don't know if there was some other kind of after run oil he put in there, but that is not a glow fuel smell that I'm smelling here. It smells a lot more like gasoline than anything, but I don't know. Anyway, so that's that. Nice and clean. I'm not going to bother doing anything else on this. These pistons move really well. The engine's nice and clean. I don't see any reason to disassemble this any further. I probably could have gone without doing this at all, but being a used engine of unknown runtime or unknown care, I needed to do this just for my own edification. So I'm going to put this thing back together, then I'm going to make up a batch of JB weld and start filling these holes in here, and hope that cures up in time for my 30 size 4-stroke comparison. Okay, so I know I ended the last video saying I wasn't going to tear this engine down any further, but I didn't do that. I continued on, and I figured now is a good time for me to turn this video back on and show you some of the things I found. Some of which are sort of disturbing. So, I took the cam cover off first, timing cover, and it was really dark and nasty in there, and it smelled like gasoline. So I know for a fact gasoline has been run through this engine, which is unfortunate. I don't know how it affected any of the components, but we'll find out. So those of you that aren't too familiar with these smaller OS engines, they don't really have, this isn't really supported by a ball bearing. It's supported by a single ball bearing, not a caged ball bearing like the larger engines are. So one of the key things is when you take these guys apart, these balls come out. And if you lose them, life sucks, because these little things are hard to find. So if you ever disassemble these guys, be aware that that ball is there. My other one's over here on the table. The reason I decided to tear this down a little bit further was because I turned it over and I was watching the piston move back and forth, and I saw this on the side of the wall. It is part of the Teflon pad that goes on the wrist pin that is supposed to keep this wrist pin from scoring the inside of the sleeve. It has become disconnected from its section there of the wrist pin. You can see this side has a pad on there still. This side has part of it, but the top of it has come off. I didn't like when I saw that. So I figured I better go ahead and take this thing down completely. Now I don't see any damage to the inside of the sleeve, luckily. But that's not a very good thing. Now the other thing that I noticed that was very interesting about this FS-30 Surpass engine is it is unlike any other OS 4-stroke engine in one major way. And that way is that usually on OS 4-stroke engines there's a hole right here that you can see is filled. That hole is usually for extraction of the wrist pin so that you can take the piston off, so you can get the connecting rod off, so you can take the crankshaft out, so you can change bearings. Excuse me, this engine is not designed that way at all. When I noticed that this was filled, I was like, holy moly, this should be interesting. Apparently what they've done is they managed to make it so that there's enough room once you remove the sleeve. They managed to make it so there's enough room to actually get this piston and connecting rod to come right off, like every other engine, or at least most other two-stroke engines. So that's kind of a cool thing. So I felt really good about that. Now the fact is I just need to go and these bearings, I don't know, I'm going to oil them up. They sound kind of loud. I'll probably use these bearings for my 4-stroke comparison, but if I decide to keep this engine, I'm going to replace them because they seem kind of loud to me. But I think for my 4-stroke comparison, they should be alright. I don't know if that's because there had been gasoline in this. I would think that that wouldn't really affect bearings too much, but let's see if I can clean that crankshaft up. Or I could just go ahead and press this thing out. But anyway, I wanted to turn the video back on and show you what I found there. So anyway, the other thing is that's kind of cool is that this wrist pin has just been wanting to just fall right out. Oh, there it is. So the good news for me is that I believe I actually have a replacement wrist pin for an FS-26 Surpass engine, which should be okay because I don't have any spare, these little Teflon end pieces. The wrist pin I bought, this comes as a part of it. So I'm going to go and dig up that wrist pin and see if I can just replace the whole wrist pin here and be done with this thing. And this little Teflon thing sucks because this could have very easily slid, since it was so loosey-goosey in there, very easily could have slid one way or the other, however it was oriented, and scored this cylinder and permanently damaged the sleeve. And then I would have had to replace the sleeve. And parts for this engine are getting harder to find. I think I may have seen a sleeve, but I don't want to go investing a whole lot of money in this thing. It seems to be a very low-time engine. It's just unfortunate of what I found here. But anyway, it is what it is, so that's what I found, and that's why I started the video back up.